Good day everyone. Welcome to another session of our subject. How is everybody? I hope that you're doing okay. So, I think we have discussed so far under the labor law branch, particularly in labor standards, the basics like the hours of work. We're done with that. We are also done with the holiday pay. We are done with the what else? We're done with service charge. Yeah, service charge. And where did we stop? I think we stopped at 13th month pay. I received two emails, two questions from your class. I received it through email. And the first question was all about the difference between a service charge and a tip. Okay? I think this was asked by one of your classmates. He asked me, is service charge and tip, or are service charges and tip the same? The answer is no, they are not. Number one, when you say service charge, it's actually mandated by law, or it's guaranteed by law. It's under the labor standards law. But a tip is not. It's basically a consideration given by a satisfied client or a satisfied customer. It's not demandable because, again, it is out from the generosity and satisfaction of the client. So, service charge is definitely not a tip. Another thing is that service charge does not depend on the satisfaction of the client. Whether the client is satisfied or not, when the establishment that he enters is charging a service charge, then you have to pay for that because it's already included in your bill. A tip, on the other hand, is not. It's over and above the bill that you are paying, out from the generosity and satisfaction of the client. So, what we are talking is only about the service charges. When a client is satisfied with the services given or rendered by a waiter or an employee, then he may also give a tip, and that is personal to the employee, not to all employees in the establishment, but personal to the one that renders service, to the one that gave the tip. Another question, I think this was raised before, is 13th month pay and Christmas bonus the same? The answer is no. 13th month pay is guaranteed by law under PD 851, while Christmas bonus, I think I discussed this last time, Christmas bonus is out also from the generosity of the employer. You cannot demand a Christmas bonus for the fact that it's a bonus. Okay? So, it's not demandable by law, but 13th month pay is. Okay? So, what the law guarantees you is that you are receiving, or you should receive 13th month pay. But Christmas bonus, again, is not under the law. Okay? It could be a practice in the company, or it could be a form of generosity on the part of the employer. So, pwede mong lambingin yung employer mo with respect to Christmas bonus, but not 13th month pay. Kahit hindi mo yan lambingin, pwede mong kasuhan yung employer mo pag hindi nagbigay ng 13th month pay, kasi that is guaranteed by Presidential Decree 851. I hope we are clear on that. Thank you for the questions. I really appreciate students raising questions because it gives me the impression that you are actually following the flow of our subject. So thank you very much. Now let's proceed to another topic. Still, this is part of the labor law branch, particularly in labor standards. But this time, we will no longer discuss about the benefits, but we will talk about the very consideration of the employer-employee relationship. Bakit ba nagtatrabaho ang empleyado? Nagtatrabaho ang empleyado dahil kailangan niya ng pera. Binibenta ng employee ang kanyang lakas at oras sa employer. Okay? Kapalit niyan, binabayaran ng employer yung empleyado niya in a form of what we call wages. Is wage and salary the same? Well, technically, they are not. They are not the same. But we commonly use wage and salary interchangeably. But technically, they are not the same. Because when you say wage, it's normally associated with low-income daily wage earners. While salary, on the other hand, this refers to the compensation for employees other than daily paid minimum wage workers. In short, when you say salary, it's higher than the minimum wage. Okay? So, yan. Usually, the term salary is being used in office setup or in a professional setup. While wage is usually common in manual labor setup. Okay? Now, let's go to the principles that you have to remember the moment that you receive your sweldo. Okay? So, when you become future teachers, of course, the school will be paying you. Okay, that the school will be giving you your salary. Okay, so there are some principles that you need to know once you receive your salary. Okay, so remember that the first principle that I want you to remember is yung sweldo. The wages must be paid in legal tender. Okay? This is found in Article 97. Hindi enough na binabayaran mo yung empleyado mo ng pera. Because the more precise statement for that is the wage must be paid in legal tender. What do you mean by legal tender? Legal tender means na it must be acceptable in the common dealings. So meaning to say, ito yung pera na pwedeng i-transact ng isang tao. So for example, hindi lahat ng pera kasi tinatawag nating legal tender kasi una, if ang pera ay phase out na, pera pa rin siya. Pero hindi na siya pwedeng i-transact. So hindi na siya legal tender. So kaya nga sinabi ko sa inyo kanina na ang first principle na dapat ninyong tandaan, hindi enough na yung sweldo mo ay pera. The more precise principle is that the wage must be paid in legal tender. Meaning to say, pwedeng maitransact ng empleyado yung na-receive niya na sweldo galing sa kanyang amo. Okay? Another thing is that hindi rin lahat ng present currency or yung present na pera ay matatawag na legal tender. Because, for example, with respect to coins, meron tayong limitations. Okay? So, pwede bang, kunwari yung sweldo mo ay 10,000, pero ang ibibigay sa iyo tag piso or tag 5, isa ka track na 5 pesos or isa ka cellophane piso or 25 centavos ang ibigay sa imuha as sweldo. Pwede bang ganun? Total, if you count them all together, lalabas yung total value ng compensation. The answer is no. Although, if you treat each coin is legal tender, but if you treat them all together, this time we have limitations as to coins. Okay? So with respect to legal tender, let me check if we have we have an updated rule with respect to coins. Saglit lang. Lumabas ito na news recently na may isang employer binigyan niya ng sweldo yung kanyang tauhan, pero per centavo or centavos yung pagbigay. So, ang question dun is it valid? The answer is no. It's actually not valid because it's no longer legal tender. Legal tenderness, especially in coins, have limitations. Okay, for a while ha. Okay. We have 573 series of 2006. There's a question here kasi out from the recent incident na nangyari, there was a question, can an employer pay their employees' salaries purely in coins? The answer of Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas was under Circular number 537 series of 2006, payment, particularly in the form of coins, shall be legal tender or must be accepted for as long as it does not exceed a certain limit. Kaya nga, sinabi ko sa inyo kanina, while that coin, like for example, piso or 5, pwede mo siyang ma-transact, so meaning to say legal tender siya, pero pag ibigay mo siya ng isang truck, or if you give that as a salary altogether, it really depends on the amount of the coins. So for example, ang yung income mo sa piso wifi, yun yung sinweldo mo sa empleyado mo. Ikaw na lang mag-count, basta sigurado ako 5,000 yan, pero yan na yun, isang sakong piso. So, again, the legal tenderness with respect to coins has limitations. Okay, for example, if we are talking about 1 peso to 5 pesos denomination, 5 peso denominations, they must not exceed 1,000. Okay? While the 1 cent, meron pa ba yung 1 centavo ngayon? I think meron pa yung silver. Then we have 5 cents, 10 cents, at saka 25 cents. All together, you can still transact them basta hindi siya mag-exceed ng 100 pesos. Okay? So again, from 1 peso to 5, 1,000 lang yung limit or yung cap. Pero kung centavos ang pag-uusapan natin, the cents must not exceed 100 pesos in total. So meaning to say, kapag sinweldohan mo yung empleyado mo, the amount is 5,000 pero tag 25 cents, I don't think that will be legal tender because it's clear under Circular number 537 of the BSP na may limitations nga kapag coins ang pag-uusapan. Will it have the same effect kapag bills? The answer is no. Sa bills naman, ang titingnan mo lang dyan, and even in the coins, kung pwede pa ba siyang matransact in normal transactions, normal commercial transactions, okay, or dealings. So, yan. That's why, the first principle that you should remember is that the wage must be paid in legal tender. Attorney, hindi ba pwedeng ang sweldo ay prutas? Like, your sweldo is 5,000, pero ang binigay sa'yo is a 5,000 worth of durian. Pwede bang ganun? The answer is also no. Okay? Why? Because under Article 97, ang sinabi dyan, the wage paid to any employee refers to the remuneration of earnings, however designated, capable of being expressed in terms of money. So meaning to say, it must be money. But again, you have to relate that with our first principle, which is the money must be in legal tender. Kasi hindi lahat ng pera ay legal tender. Okay? So, yan. Now, in relation to this, we have the concept of facilities and the concept of supplements. Okay. Like for example, meron kang sweldo. Pero minsan, may mga employers na sasabihin na dahil free ka ng dahil dito ka kumakain, dito ka natutulog, yung accommodation mo at saka yung pagkain mo or yung meals mo will be deducted to the salaries or will be part of the salary. Meron ring iba na talagang free talaga siya. Okay? It's not part of the compensation. Have you noticed that in some arrangements? Yan yung pinagkaiba ng facilities na concept at saka yung supplements. We have this case, Mabesa versus NLRC, GR number 118506, where the Supreme Court made a clear distinction between facilities and the concept of supplements. When you say facilities, okay, these are benefits granted to the employees but for the convenience of the employees talaga. But when you say supplements, they are benefits granted to the employees but for the convenience of the employer. Okay? So, yan yung pagkakaiba niya. Ang facilities, binigay talaga sa iyo ng amo mo and that is for your own benefit. Walang interest ang employer dyan. The reason na binigyan ka ng room kasi wala kang bahay, the reason na pinapakain ka kasi wala kang pagkain, so sa'yo na yan. But meron din tinatawag na supplements. Meaning to say, the very reason why binigyan ka ng ganitong perks ng employer mo is because that will be beneficial. That will redound to the benefit of the employer. Like for example, you need to, or I need to give you a room, or I need to give you a house, an accommodation, because yung trabaho mo minsan merong on-call, and you need to assist me during those times. So dahil hindi natin alam kung kailan yung on-call, or kailan yung mga emergency periods na kailangan kita, better na dito ka na lang magtira sa amin. So meaning to say, basically, the benefit that you are giving to your employee is for your convenience, not actually to the convenience of the employee. So yan yung tinatawag na supplements. While facilities, it's not primarily to the employer, but it's really given for the benefit of the employee. Ngayon, what is the implication? When you say facilities, okay, again, ano nga yung facilities? These are benefits granted for the convenience of the employees. Okay? Like for example, meals, lodging. These facilities could not be deducted without the employer complying first with certain legal requirements. Okay, so pwede siyang deductible, but you have to comply with the requirements. Like, first proof must be shown that the facilities are customarily furnished by the nature of the business. Second is the provision of deductible facilities must be voluntarily accepted in writing. Hindi pwedeng mag-usap lang kayo ng empleyado na yung kuryente mo dyan sa room mo, yung tubig mo, that will be deducted on your, kasi dito ka mananirahan sa amin. Hindi siya pwedeng oral agreement. It should be voluntarily accepted on the part of the employee and it must be in writing. And finally, yung deduction dyan or yung pag-charge mo doon sa sweldo must be fair and reasonable value. So there are 3 requirements in order for the employer to deduct those benefits from the from the compensation of the employee. First, that facility must be customarily furnished by the trade. Okay? Second, it must be voluntarily accepted by the employee in writing. And third, it must be, or the charge must be fair and reasonable value. Okay? But when you say supplement, again, when you say supplements, these are benefits given to the employee, but actually, it's for the convenience of the employer. So, in such a case, will it be deductible from the compensation of the employee? In this case, the Supreme Court said that because this benefit or privilege is granted to an employee for the convenience of the employer, then basically it's not a facility. But again, it's what you call supplements, okay, or supplement. So, if it's a supplement, then that should not be deducted from the sweldo or compensation or wage of the employee, because again, it's primarily granted for the benefit of the employer. Okay? So, yan. Like for example, yung mga tao sa vessel or sa barko. Yung mga pagkain ba nila dyan during the voyage, pwede bang i-deduct ng employer sa mga crew ng vessel? In the case of Philippine Navigation versus Commission on Internal Revenue, the Supreme Court said no, because the meals for the entire duration of the voyage na expenses, okay, the meals are actually for the benefit of the employer. Okay, it's for the benefit or convenience of the employer, not actually sa employees. Okay, hence, because of that, that should be treated as supplements. And because it's a supplement, in the case of Mabesa versus NLRC, we have already established na hindi mo yan pwedeng i-deduct sa sweldo ng mga tauhan mo. Kasi nga, it's primarily for the convenience of the employer, not sa employees. But attorney, if you try to think of it, ang kumakain yung mga empleyado dun or yung mga crew sa vessel, bakit primarily convenience pa rin siya sa may-ari ng ship? Ang sabi ng court dito, the very reason why it's primarily for the convenience of the owner of the vessel is because if you will allow each of these crew to make their own meals for the entire duration of the voyage, that will have a that will have danger on the part of the vessel. Okay? The safety of the vessel or the ship will be put at risk. So if they will not be given free meals for the entire duration, they are actually giving them the permission to cook. That will endanger the ship because of the fire. So kailangan mag-hire si owner ng vessel ng magluto dyan para isahan na lang. And that will be for the safety of the ship. Hence, the expenses for the meals are considered as supplements and not facilities. Therefore, that should not be deducted from the compensation of your employees. Okay? Now, let's go to Article 102. We are still on the first principle na dapat in a form of money yung sweldo, and at the same time it must be of legal tender. Now, dahil ang sinabi doon kanina sa first principle kailangan pera, then basically Article 102 is confirming that no employer shall pay the wages of an employee by means of promissory note, vouchers, coupons, tokens, tickets, cheats, or any object other than legal tender, even when expressly requested by the employee. So, even if yung employee gusto niya na instead, bigyan mo ako ng pera, bigyan mo na lang ako ng ticket sa concert. Yun na lang yung sweldo ko. Hindi talaga yan siya pwede under Article 102. Kasi that will violate the first principle of wage na dapat it must be in a money, a form of money, and it must be of legal tender. Now, if you will allow that, that will violate the first principle nga. And that is clearly prohibited under Article 102 even when expressly requested by the employee. Now, attorney, how about kung cheque? Or how about cheque? Can you compel your employee to receive a check as salary? The answer is no. Strictly speaking, no. Bakit? Because the first principle nga is it must be in a form of money. Check is not a money. Okay? It's a negotiable instrument, but it's not a money in itself. Hence, it's not also legal tender. Hence, that is a violation of the first principle. But how about yung ATM card? Well, ATM card is not the salary in itself. It's just a vehicle for the employees to get their money from the nearest ATM. Okay? And that is now acceptable. Okay? Actually, the checks are now acceptable too. But if you try to check, or if you try to apply the first principle strictly, that will not pass. That will not pass because it's not a money and it's not of legal tender. Okay? So, yan. The second principle that I want you to remember is this. You cannot pay wages below the applicable minimum wage. Ibig sabihin, hindi pwedeng magbayad si employer ng sweldo sa kanyang empleyado na below sa minimum wage na sinet ng Minimum Wage Board or the Regional Tripartite Wages and Productivity Boards. Okay? Now, attorney, may napansin kami, bakit yung minimum wage sa Manila ay different sa minimum wage sa Davao City? It's because the minimum wages are set by region. Okay? And even in the same region, attorney, may napapansin din kami na bakit mas malaki yung sweldo sa mga tao sa opisina kumpara sa sweldo doon sa farm. Again, even if they are of the same region, the next consideration here is the classification, whether you are in the agricultural sector or non-agricultural sector. This is found in Article 99. Okay? So again, hindi ka pwedeng magbigay ng sweldo na mas maliit sa minimum wage. Kasi yung minimum wage, yan na yung minimum. Yan na yung floor. So, the minimum wage rates for agricultural and non-agricultural employees and workers in each and every region of the country shall be those prescribed by RTWPB. What do you mean by RTWPB? The Regional Tripartite Wages and Productivity Boards. This board is the one responsible for setting the minimum wage per region. Okay? And even in the same region, meron siyang classification. Ito yung minimum wage sa agricultural sector. Ito yung sweldo ng non-agricultural sector. That is why, if you are an employee of agricultural sector and your friend is an employee of non-agricultural sector, even if you are on the same region, magkaiba talaga yung minimum wage dyan. Again, the second principle is just saying na hindi pwedeng magbigay sa employer ng mas maliit pa sa minimum wage na sinet ni RTWPB. Okay? So, yan. The third principle that I want you to remember is that Article 100, this is all about the prohibition against diminution of benefits. Okay, ano bang ibig sabihin niyan? Hindi mo pwedeng babaan ang sweldong ini-enjoy na ng iyong empleyado. Okay? Just because mahina na yung sales mo or mahina na yung performance ng business mo, babaan mo yung sweldo ng empleyado. That will result to a diminution of benefits. And that's actually a prohibition under Article 100 of the Labor Code. It says there that nothing in this book shall be construed to eliminate or in any way diminish the supplements or other employee benefits being enjoyed at the time of the promulgation of this code. Meaning to say, hindi na pwedeng pababa or babaan yung sweldo because the sweldo of the employee ay paangat ng paangat. Yan yun siya. It's actually increasing. It should not be decreasing. As time goes by, it is expected that the wage will also increase or the salary will also increase and you cannot go backward. Okay? Otherwise, that will result to diminution of benefits. Okay? So, in relation with that, we have Article 127. No wage order issued by any regional board shall provide for wage rates lower than the statutory minimum wage rates prescribed by the Congress. Okay? So, wage orders are always increasing. Okay? Okay. Now, let's go to another principle. The wage shall be paid at least once every 2 weeks. Kaya, nauso yung quincenas na sinasabi. Because, in a month, it is expected that you will be receiving twice. Okay, you will be receiving a salary twice. Once every 2 weeks. Okay? It's found in Article 103 of the Labor Code. Now, the wages shall be paid at least once every 2 weeks or twice a month. The interval, not exceeding 16 days. So, meaning to say, pwede pang magbigay ng sweldo si employer hanggang sa 16 kasi not exceeding 16 days man. But if lalampas yan ng 17, then that will be a violation already of this principle. That is why also, allowed pa rin si employer na magbigay ng sweldo by the 31. Okay? 16 to 31. Because again, it still does not exceed the 16-day limitation provided by law. Now, pwede bang mag-excuse si employer na madidelay yung pagbigay ng sweldo na hindi ma-violate yung Article 103? The answer is, in some instances, the law may consider, like for example, if on account of force majeure or circumstances beyond the employer's control, then the payment of wages on or within the time herein provided cannot be made, the employer shall pay the wages immediately after such force majeure or circumstances have ceased. What do you mean by force majeure? Nandyan na. Yan yung mga circumstances na beyond the control of man. Like bagyo, volcanic eruption. We cannot do anything about that. It's an act of God. Hence, that could be an excuse here for the delay. The reason why the employer cannot give to the employee on time, it's because something happened. Okay? And the event was not out from the action made by the employer, but it's beyond his control. Okay? And that will be an excuse. However, it's not an excuse for the employer not to give the salary to the employee. Ang sinabi dyan, excuse ka lang as to the timeliness of the payment. But that will not exempt you from paying your employee of his or her salary. Because ang sabi dito, the employer shall pay the wages immediately after such force majeure or circumstances have ceased. Okay? So, yan. No employer shall make the payment with less frequency than once a month. The payment of wages of employees engaged to perform a task, project, or task-based which cannot be completed in 2 weeks shall be subject to the following conditions in the absence of a CBA or arbitration award. That payments are made at intervals not exceeding 16 days in proportion to the amount of work completed, and the final settlement is made upon the completion of the work. That last paragraph under Article 103 applies only to project-based employees or task-based employees. Like for example, you were employed for purposes of building this particular project or making this particular study. After that, wala na, tapos na tayo. Okay? Now, does it mean na pag hindi pa natapos yung project or pag hindi pa natapos yung task, hindi pa mabibigyan ng compensation si employee? Meaning to say, kailangan 100% natapos namin before namin makuha yung sweldo namin. Ganun ba? The answer is no. Because Article 103 is saying na you are not excused on the 2 week you are not excused from the once every 2 weeks na rule. Meaning to say, even if hindi pa niya natapos yung project or hindi pa niya na-complete yung task, you still have or you are still covered by this rule. Magbabayad ka pa rin not exceeding 16 days. Okay? But this time, dahil hindi pa natapos yung project or hindi pa na-complete yung task, ang sinasabi dyan, you will not pay 100%. But you will be paying in proportion to the amount of work completed. Kapag na-complete niya na yung project or kapag na-accomplish niya na yung task, then yung balance, babayaran mo na siya. Okay? So, yan. Now, another principle that you have to remember with respect to your salary or compensation is saan ba dapat ibibigay ang sweldo? The answer is found in Article 104. The payment of wages shall be made at or near the place of undertaking. So meaning to say, the place of work. That's the general rule. Kung saan ka nagtatrabaho, then dyan mo dapat marireceive yung sweldo mo. But because of the latest circumstances that we have, and it's actually convenient on the part of the employee, ang ginagawa, you go to the bank. Okay? Especially if big establishment ito, yung mga banks kung saan affiliated yung company, dapat merong ATM dyan na malapit sa workplace in order not to violate Article 104. Okay? So, yan. But before, Article 104 is observed really na doon mo ma-receive yung sweldo mo kung saan ka nagtatrabaho. Okay? At or near the place of undertaking, except as otherwise provided by such regulations under conditions to ensure greater protection of wages. Okay? Now, the next principle is the wage or the compensation shall be given to the worker, shall be paid directly to the worker, not to the wife, not to the children, not to the girlfriend or boyfriend, but it shall be paid directly to the workers. The basis is found in Article 105, the direct payment of wages rule. Meaning to say, siya yung empleyado mo, edi sa kanya mo ibigay yung sweldo. Okay? But is there an exception here? The answer is yes. In cases of force majeure, beyond the control, it is impossible talaga na ibigay sa worker, then pwedeng para hindi lang ma-violate ni employer yung right ng employee, pwede niyang ibigay yung sweldo ng empleyado through another person as long as that person has a written authority given by the employee. So meaning to say, kailangan kung hindi talaga makaka-claim si employee kasi nasa hospital siya or under certain circumstances hindi siya makalabas, then the employee may execute a special power of attorney authorizing another person to receive the compensation on his behalf. Another exception here is when the employee died. Alangan na mag-execute pa siya SPA, patay na nga siya. So, how can we get the salary, the last pay of our father or mother who just recently died? Tapos, dapat may makli-claim pa siya. So, what should be done? Well, general rule kasi, kailangan directly paid. Pero ngayon, patay naman yung employee, then that may fall under the second exception. Here, when the employee died, then the heirs of that employee, okay, may claim the salary of their late father or late mother. So, if lahat ng mga anak, marajog na kong sweldo, no? Pero, assuming nga malaki talaga yung kukunin na sweldo, tapos namatay yung employee, then yung mga naiwan yung magti-claim dyan. But for that to be possible, kailangan na mag-execute yung mga heirs ng tinatawag nating affidavit. Pero kapag merong minor dyan, may minor sa magkakapatid, the affidavit shall be executed on his behalf by his natural guardian or next of kin. Then the affidavit shall be presented to the employer, who shall make the payment through the Secretary of Dole or his representative. Okay? Okay, for a while. Walang ko na. Anyway, naputol. So, yan. That's the principle about direct payment of wages. Again, kapag may sakuna, hindi pa namatay yung employee, it's enough na mag-execute lang ng written authority. Could be special power of attorney or just a simple authority. Basta in writing. Pero kapag namatay na yung empleyado at gusto ng mga heirs na makuha yung sweldo, last pay ng kanilang namatay na relative, then again, you just have to execute an affidavit. If merong minor, then the affidavit shall be executed on his behalf by his or her natural guardian or next of kin. That affidavit must be presented to the employer, and the employer must pay the heirs through the Secretary of Dole or his representatives. Okay? Now, another principle that you have to remember for this topic is that the principle of non-interference in the disposal of wages. Meaning to say, the employer shall not influence the employee, shall not interfere the freedom of the employee on how he or she will dispose his money. So, meaning to say, wag mong pakialaman kung ano yung gagawin ng empleyado mo sa kanyang sweldo. Okay? That's Article 112. He shall not in any manner force, compel, or oblige his employees to purchase merchandise, commodities, or other property from any other person, or otherwise make use of any store or services of such employer or any other person. Meaning to say, hindi pwede na si employer yung magfo-force sa empleyado na pangutang mo dito sa tindahan, unya bayaran lang, because that will be in a form of interference. Pag ayaw ng employee na mangutang, then do not force or compel or oblige the employee to do that. Otherwise, that will be interference. Now, there was a question before. An employer, upon giving the money to the employee during payday, sinabihan niya yung empleyado na ayaw naghapit-hapit, bisan asa, diretso na uli sa inyo. Okay? Pag-receive ng empleyado, yun yung sinabi ng employer. Huwag ka nang pumunta pa kahit saan. Dumiretso ka na sa bahay ninyo. Is that an interference? Is that a violation under this principle? The Supreme Court said no. It's not an interference, but it's just an advice. Okay? So, yan. Now, let's go to wage deduction. Pwede bang mag-deduct si employer ng sweldo sa empleyado niya? General rule, hindi. Okay? That is found in Article 113. No employer in his behalf or in behalf of any person shall make any deduction from the wages of his employees. So, the general rule is that hindi mo pwedeng kaltasan ang sweldo ng empleyado mo. Exceptions. Of course, there are exceptions. Number 1, if your employee is insured, okay, and insured siya with his consent, okay, so yan, the employer can deduct from the compensation of his employees a certain amount of money as premium for the insurance. Second, pwede ring mag-deduct si employer sa sweldo ng kanyang empleyado for union dues. This applies kapag may union ang kumpanya. Okay? Kapag may union ang kumpanya, it's actually a job or responsibility of the employer to withhold a portion of the compensation as union dues. And the employer will turn over that money to the union. Okay? Yan. Another exception here is in cases where the employer is authorized by law or regulations issued by the Secretary of DOLE. Meron bang mga batas or regulations na authorize ang employer na mag-deduct sa sweldo or mag-withhold ng sweldo ng mga employees niya? The answer is yes. Like for example, income tax. Okay? Income tax. That is withheld by the employer. Okay? What else? SSS. What else? Pag-ibig and PhilHealth. So yan. Or GSIS contribution. It's the law mandates na yung employer yung mag-withhold niyan. Okay? So, meaning to say, i-withhold na yan ng employer sa sweldo ng kanyang mga tauhan. So, pagdating ng payday, ang marireceive na lang ni employee ay sobrang liit na lang. Because probably meron siyang insurance, tapos meron pa siyang union dues, tapos magbabayad pa siya sa BIR for the income tax. Meron pang SSS contribution, pag-ibig, PhilHealth. So, yan. So, naiwan, yun. Other than that, go back to the general rule. Hindi pwedeng mag-withhold or mag-deduct sa employer. Okay? Now, another principle is deposits for loss or damage. Okay. This principle is observed or should be observed. No employer shall require his worker to make deposits from which deduction shall be made for the reimbursement of loss of or of damage to tools, materials, or equipment supplied by the employer. Ang general rule, hindi mo pwedeng i-advance deduction. Walang advance deduction. Wala namang ginawa yung empleyado. Bakit mong i-deduct? Yung reason mo lang is in the event na magkaroon ng problema or nanakaw yung motor or nasira niya yung unit, edi doon natin kukunin sa naipon na deposit. It's not allowed under Article 114. Except na lang when the employer is engaged in such trades, occupations, or business where the practice of making deductions or requiring deposits is a recognized one or is necessary or desirable as determined by the Secretary of DOLE in appropriate rules and regulations. But going back to the general rule, hindi pwedeng mag-advance deposit. Okay? Now, paano kung nakasira ng equipment si employee, nabasag niya yung pinggan or what? Or paano kung nawala niya yung motor during the time na nagtatrabaho siya? Company car. No deduction from the deposits of an employee for the actual amount of the loss or damage shall be made. So, meaning to say, lugi sa employer if that is the case kasi hindi pwedeng mag-deduct. General rule lang yan siya. Hindi mo pwedeng i-deduct kay employee ang buong kabuuan ng amount ng nasirang equipment or nawalang property ng company unless the employee has been heard and his responsibility has been clearly shown. In short, kailangan pa ng investigation. Hindi mo pwedeng i-deduct sa sweldo niya yung nasira niyang equipment or yung nawala niyang equipment without investigation. There must be an investigation. He must be given the chance to be heard. And out from that investigation, his responsibility has been clearly shown. That is the only time that the employer is allowed to deduct an amount from his compensation to pay for the loss or damaged equipment. Now, what if yung sweldo niya ay 5,000 lang, pero yung nasira niya ay amounting to 500,000? So, meaning to say, may mga periods na talagang nagtatrabaho siya na wala siyang sweldo kasi 100% ng sweldo niya ibabayad niya agad doon sa nasira niyang equipment or nawala niyang property. The answer is no. That's not also allowed. While it is allowed na pagbabayaran ni employee yung nasira niyang equipment or yung nawala niyang property ng company out from his negligence as a result of the investigation findings, pero hindi pwedeng 100% i-deduct mo siya diretso. Okay? The deduction must not be more than 20% of the weekly wage. The reason here is that it's for the employee na kahit nagbabayad siya sa iyo, nagbabayad siya sa employer, meron pa rin siyang take home. Okay? So meaning to say, again, kahit siya yung liable, hindi pwedeng 100% out from that pay, i-apply mo doon sa damages. Hindi pwede. It must not be more than 20% of the weekly wage only. Okay? Hanggang sa mabayaran niya talaga ng buong buo. Okay. We are almost done. Let's proceed to withholding of wages and kickbacks. They are prohibited. This is Article 116. It shall be unlawful for any person, directly or indirectly, to withhold any amount from the wages of a worker or to induce him to give up any part of his wages by force, stealth, intimidation, threat, or by any other means whatsoever without the worker's consent. Okay? But if there is a consent from the worker, then this could be an excuse. But Article 117 says, it shall be unlawful to make any deduction from the wages of any employee for the benefit of the employer or his representative or intermediary as a consideration of a promise of employment or retention in employment. Like for example, may nagpapasok sa iyo dyan. And then sabihin niya na porsyentuha ko ha. Pag magsweldo ka, dapat na dyan pud ko'y porsyentuhan na kaya ako ba nagpasulod na sa imo ha. Otherwise, pahawaon ta ka dira. That is not allowed under Article 117. That's what you call kickback. Okay? And again, it's prohibited under Article 116 and Article 117. Okay? Now, Article 118. Retaliatory measures. For the employers, it shall be unlawful for you to refuse to pay or to reduce the wages and benefits, discharge, or in any manner discriminate against any employee na nag-file ng kaso against sa iyo, or kung hindi man siya yung nag-file, naging witness siya ng complainant against sa iyo. Okay? May mga employer na pinipersonal yung kaso. Like for example, nag-file ng kaso yung employee kasi may violation sa labor, or nag-file ng criminal case yung isang tao at yung empleyado mo yung naging witness. Ngayon, ang ginawa mo as a retaliatory measure, you refuse now to give or to pay him compensation despite the work, or you reduce the wage and benefits without reasons. Actually, that's not allowed. That's diminution, di ba? Or dinismiss mo talaga yung empleyado, or kung hindi mo siya diniscriminate mo siya in some other way na iba na yung treatment ni employer before and after the incident. So that is what you call retaliatory measures, and this can be a basis of awarding moral damages on the part of the employee. Why? Because that's bad faith. Okay? That's malicious. Okay? So, yan. Last but not the least is that Article 119. It's all about false reporting. It shall be unlawful for any person to make any statement, report, or record filed or kept, okay, pursuant to the provisions of this code, knowing such statement, report, or record to be false in any material respect. Now, is the employer obliged to give a payroll? The answer is yes, or the payslip. Because that is the purpose of informing the employee about the deduction, the salary, and the computation. Now, suppose there is a payslip, but the payslip is falsified. Like, it's false just to have a report in DOLE that you are compliant. But in truth and in fact, these amounts were not given to the employees. That's what you call false reporting. And that's a violation under Article 119. Okay? So, yan. Employer is obliged to give payslip to the employees. And employer must also have a record of the payments made to the employee. In fact, they are required to keep the records 3 years because money claims prescribe in 3 years. So dapat 3 years. So today, this year 2021, the employer must still have the records in 2020, 2019, and 2018. Okay, 3 years man. So yan. So all of these are principles that you must observe being an employer or being an employee, okay, for your compensation. Okay, any questions? If you have any, please feel free to comment them or to raise them through my email, through my Adu email, or through the Tigler chat box, and I will be willing to assist you in answering some of the concepts or your questions. Okay? So, I hope that you have learned something today. God bless everyone and be safe.